Hi again, Andy here, carrying on with the deep dive into part modeling. Where we left off in the previous video was looking at some ways of making sketches as the fundamental driving geometry for your design. So let's carry on with that. There's a few tricks I want to show you. I realize that this is a little tedious because you just want to get to making stuff. But trust me, if you go through some of the things I'll show you, it will make your ability to make stuff and, more importantly, to modify stuff much, much easier and less frustrating. So let's get back to it. Here we are with the sketch that I was working on a moment ago. I'm going to carry on with this. And right now, I had shown you that even though I've specified the vertical distance of 15 millimeters from this hole to this hole, this one is kind of moving around. The other thing that's interesting is you'll notice that the whole framework of the part is moving around. Well, I haven't actually nailed stuff down. I just randomly drew these in space. And that's okay in some cases, but let's try some relationships. Now, for starters, if my mouse is just showing the pointer and I roll it over things, it shows a bunch of the features. They're not features. A bunch of the sketch features that I can select. This icon here shows a line. I could pick this line. If I move it up to the middle of the line, I could pick the center point of the line. If I move it to this corner, I could pick the corner. So if I pick that corner, and you can see that it shows me on the left hand for that point the relations. Now the relations are within the sketch. So they're telling me that that corner is related to something else by a distance. And it shows me if I click that existing relation, shows me in light blue in my version that my distance is from here to there. If I delete that distance, then you can see that the distance that I had specified is gone. That was one of the dimensions I'd done. So that dimensioning tool creates relations between parts. I don't really want to do that, so I'm just going to undo. And you'll see the blue undo button at the top, very helpful. You'll also see you can go back more ways with undo, but I just went back that. I'm still in the sketch, I'm still editing the sketch, I just undid removing that point. But let's say I go back to just selecting that point, and you'll see that there's existing relations, and then there's a note here that says this is underdefined. Underdefined means that I haven't given it enough constraints to lock it in space. That's for that point. If I look at this point, this is also underdefined. If I look at even this circle, this is underdefined. The reason why everything is underdefined is because the sketch itself is flimsy, moving around. So I can pick a point and I can fix it. And you'll see that under the relations, I'm going to fix just that point. If I do that now, all of these other parts are now fully defined. Except, of course, for this one, because it genuinely is flexible. You'll notice that when I did this, I'll just go back, and I'll go back one more. See how when my parts were underdefined, all of the lines were in blue? By fully defining something, fixing that, all of the properly defined parts are now black, and that's a good thing. So another good thing is, now that we know that this is underdefined, we can actually think about, well, how do we want to actually define this part? One way to do it would be to use the Smart Dimension pick here, and say 5 millimeters, same as above. That means now if I go and I say, well, I'm going to make this one 7 millimeters, which I can edit. Oops, I should be able to edit over here. That moved this part, but perhaps what I really want is for this circle or this hole and this hole to actually somehow be lined up with one another. I'm just going to undo that dimension. That dimension, I'm going to delete that. So this is back to being flexible again for us. All of your parts in a sketch have relations. So for instance, I can pick that point and it shows me the existing relations and that it's underdefined. I could also pick, if I hold down my control key and then I select this point, oops, picked the wrong thing. Let's try that again. I pick that point and then I pick, with holding down my control key, that circle. It gives me some interrelationship options. In this case, because I picked an arc and a point, trying to think, how could you have arc and point be related to one another? One is I could make them concentric. Let's try that. Oh, it tries to do it, but it says if I do that, I'm actually going to be violating one of the relations, because I had a relationship that was 15 and it's now showing up it has to be 0 in order to satisfy this. So that's a problem. Now it changed that on me. Didn't want that to be 0, I wanted that to be 15. And of course it went in the wrong direction. Go there. Now we're back to where we started. I didn't say that the sketch tools were clever, but they are helpful once you get the hang of them. They do some weird things sometimes. But if you're familiar with how to edit the interrelationships, you'll find it will go much easier. So what I'd like to do is pick that point, and I'd really like to pick that point. If I hold Control button down and I pick that point, now I've got point 11 and point 16, and notice that there's different options for the kinds of relations that are available to me. If I'm working with the XYZ coordinate system, which I am, and I recall that up is Z, and I select vertical, bam, two things happen. One is I moved that over to below this other circle, and it's turned black. Well, it being black means that it's now fixed, or it's now fully defined, which is a good thing. And now I'm driving that location based upon only one dimension. So if I change that, it changes. If I change this, it changes. And that's really good. That means that I'm using as small a number of dimensions as I can to drive my model. It means that my model is going to be more robust, and it's going to be much easier to get the details of the shape that I want in place here. Within the sketch, I can do a bunch more things too. You'll see that there's a whole bunch of tools up here that I could pick. I could pick sketch fillet, for instance. Now, you did that in the solid model in a previous video. In this case, I'm going to pick the sketch fillet. Maybe I'll make that 3 millimeters, and I'll pick that. It warns me that I'm going to be changing a segment that's being used for a dimension, but yeah, I'm happy with that. And it changes that. One thing that I find helpful is when I do fillets in sketches, I always have it dimension each fillet, because then when I do different ones, it will tell me that I've got that dimension. Whoops. Close that. I can select the dimension and I can move it around so that it's easier to read, depending on how the rest of your drawing looks. That's fine. I could also do a bunch of other features too. You'll notice that there's a whole bunch of choices of tools you can use in sketching. And I'll get into some of those in the next video. For now, we've talked about relationships. We've talked about how to make dimensioning and make interrelationships between points and items in your sketch start to make sense and be robust. And we'll move on in the next video and talk about some other tools that you can use to make your sketches really useful and rugged. See you soon. Thanks.